the thing that always really freaks me out about this, because I don't think I really registered in my brain what was happening at the time, was that she had just black hollows instead of eyes.
Today, we have the host from one of my all-time favourite podcasts, with over 3,000 five-star reviews on Apple and Spotify, featured in BuzzFeed, Podcast Magazine, and People's Choice nominee at the Podcast Awards. It's a real honour to welcome Emma from Real Life Ghost Stories.
Hi, you've actually made me blush. Hi, it's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's a real pleasure. You've clearly done some really, really awesome stuff since you started back in 2018. So what made you start a podcast about the paranormal in the first place?
Well, part of it was because I'm really competitive. And a part of it was because I needed something creative to do. So back in 2018, I was in the middle of doing a doctorate. And usually I do theatre. That's my other thing. But when I was doing my doctorate, I couldn't do theatre because it was just too time consuming, and it would mean that I'd be rehearsing like 3-4 times a week, as well as working full time, as well as, trying to do a doctorate. So I was like, what else can I do that's creative? And I had just started listening to podcasts. I was really slow on the whole podcast thing. And I started listening to podcasts and I was like, I can do that. I could definitely do that. And I think the paranormal was it was something that I was really interested in. I'm not that much of a believer, but I love ghost stories. I think they're really fascinating, like psychologically. I think they tell us a lot about society, and I just love them. And I knew there was longevity in a paranormal podcast. And like kind of we were talking about earlier, like there was a point where when I got into podcasts, one of the first things I looked up was paranormal podcasts. And I was like, oh, these are really interesting and fun. I can do this too. So that was it, really.
When you first started your podcast series, did you find it a challenge for your first episode, or did it sort of something that just sort of come naturally to you?
I think really we sort of learned as we went. I listened to other paranormal podcasts and I knew what I didn't want to do. And I think that's how I started. I sort of worked backwards. I was like, if I'm listening to a paranormal podcast, I don't want to hear these things, actually. This is what I'd like to hear. And I worked from there. And for the first episode, I think we just sort of talked about, I had a pretty significant paranormal experience quite a long time ago now. Like every time I talk about this, I realize how much older I'm getting. But when I was 17, maybe I was a bit older, but anyway, I had a really significant paranormal experience, and I kind of knew that that would be a kind of a good basis for a first episode. And I thought, well, if this works out as an off the cuff first episode, let's see where we go from there. And that's how it all started, really.
It's funny that you said at the beginning that you're not really much of a believer, you're more of a skeptic, but you've had some kind of paranormal experience, which we'd love to hear more about later in the show. But it's funny that we've had quite a few people on this podcast so far, and they've all said similar things. They're pretty much a skeptic. They don't believe, but they've had these really weird things happen to them that they just cannot explain. And again, going back to what you said about longevity in paranormal podcasts, ghost stories have been around forever. Everyone knows somebody that's either had an experience or seen a ghost or whatever. So yeah, it's definitely an exciting field to be in, and it's absolutely fascinating whether you believe it or not, because you can't deny the millions and millions of people throughout history that have had experiences.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's such a human phenomenon to go, no, I don't believe in ghosts, I don't believe in anything like that, but this one time. And that's how I have the same thing. I do it like when I interview people all the time, when I meet people and they ask me what I do. Generally, people will go, "You tell ghost stories for a living," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's what I do." And and then universally, people will go, "So, when I was about 20, this happened to me," and I'm like, so not a believer? Okay, I see.
I actually had one guy I was at a wedding recently, and he's the first person that I said, oh, everyone knows somebody with he's a podcaster as well, but in like the sporty kind of field. And yeah, I said the same. Oh, everyone knows somebody with a ghost story, and he was like, I don't. I was like, what?
Is the only person out there who just doesn't have a story.
Yeah. Everyone we know. Everyone we all know.
But I love a good story.
Maybe he'd be far more interesting to interview. How did you get to this stage of your life and not meet anybody who has a ghost story?
Yeah, I do find it fascinating, like whether it is something that's paranormal, supernatural that we don't know about, or whether it's something in our brain, a trick in our mind, whatever it is just really, really a fascinating thing to look into.
Yeah.
So yeah, your podcast isn't just about ghosts, is it, right?
No, there's slightly more to it. So I'm a cryptid girly through and through. I bloody love a cryptid. Like the majority of the stories that I tell. So on a Sunday, I do like a deep dive into a famous paranormal case or claim. And then on a Wednesday and a Friday, I do listeners' episodes where listeners have sent in their stories. But honestly, one of my favourite things to talk about is cryptids. So every so often, I just sort of shove in a little cryptid story. And a lot of people are like, we're not here for cryptids. And I'm like, well, you'll like it because I love it. So I do cryptid stories every so often. And sometimes I do the odd UFO stories. I'm not a massive fan of them, but I do them every so often. But yeah, so it's not just ghosts. There's a bit of everything.
I'm fascinated in the sort of like the cryptids as well. I remember when I was really little, finding a book in Mum's cabinet all about these different stories. I don't know if she's still got the book, but I remember all these different stories from around the world, or all these different encounters. And I remember reading this one about it was about a Bigfoot who attacked two hunters, and it killed one of them and snapped its neck, and then the other one like shot at it and run off. But I remember doing like I must have been about 8 years old, and I did a school report on this story, and my teachers were a little bit worried, like he's got a very active imagination. I got it from the book. But yeah, that's something that's always fascinated me as well. Like, I suppose it's more of an urban legend in the UK, but like, you've got the fen tiger, and apparently there's all the old was it panthers that are meant to like roam around the English countryside. Not ever seen anything, but it's still just I find it fascinating. Who knows, really?
Yeah, the alien big cats, isn't it? The ABCs. And there's so many people who dedicate their lives to like tracking all these different sightings. I think there was one pretty recently where a guy took a photo that wasn't like a pixelated blur, and it looks like some sort of panther to me. Like it was a close up of this, or like a zoomed in shot of this animal, and its face is like, that's not a cat, a domestic cat. That's just bigger. That looks like some sort of panther. And I'd love them to be exist. I'd love for somebody to come out with definitive proof and say, yes, they are roaming around the English countryside. I'd love it.
I think I saw the same thing recently with the cat, the picture, and that's no house cat. So we have a really exciting guest coming on the podcast. He's got some books out about Bigfoot. It's William Sheehan. He's coming on in a few weeks. And I'm not sure if you've read any of his books, being into cryptids and stuff. What are the books called again, Nigel?
Bigfoot, Terror in the Woods. Yeah, I started reading them. I just thought, I love anything about like Sasquatch or Bigfoot. And I just come across him on like a guest on someone's podcast, and then he's like, oh, he's got books. So I bought a few of his books and just like reading them with like my dad, because he's all interested in that as well, and just like reading through some of the stories. And it's just like, I don't know if it is true or if someone is making it up, but it just sounds like absolutely fascinating to me. Not that I would want to meet anything like that, like visually face to face. I think I would just like, die on the spot. But I just, it's something about it. I think it's I suppose a bit of like fantasy type thing. But yeah, it just sort of like sparks something in my imagination.
So I've got a question for you guys. Aside from Bigfoot, because Bigfoot is obviously the godfather of cryptids, if a cryptid was proven to be real, what cryptid would you like it to be and why?
That's a good one. I think personally I'd go for the Skinwalker Ranch skin crawler. Why would I like it to be real? Just because there's been so many accounts, and I'm not much of a cryptid person. I don't really look into it that much, but I've seen and heard a lot about Skinwalker Ranch and everything, and I just find it really interesting. So whether that's UFOs or whether it's bullshit, who knows? So yeah, I'm gonna go for him. What about you, Nigel?
I'll probably go for Mothman. I'm not really sure why, because like a part of me is like, is it an actual cryptid, or is it some billionaire who's made this suit and he's just playing the wildest trick on people? But I'd kind of like that to be sort of like a real, because again, it'd be terrifying. But yeah, as long as it's not near me.
So I do stuff on Patreon where every so often I find the best of the worst cryptid erotica on Amazon, and I read it. And there's a lot of cryptid erotica out there, just to let people know.
Really?
Oh, there is a lot. And once you start looking, your recommendations become all sorts of weird. But and one of them that I found was called Mated to Mothman, and let's just say it was interesting. So if anybody out there listening is into cryptid erotica, no judgment, but there is loads out there to be found.
I think you're going to have a secret new hobby, Nige. Sounds like your kind of thing.
Cryptic erotica.
Naughty elf things, all sorts.
I found one. I was doing another podcast interview, which in hindsight, they were both children's authors, so I don't feel like it was the appropriate time to bring it up. But sometimes I don't really think these things through. And I was doing this interview, and they were talking about like, what's the weirdest thing in your like browsing history? And I was like, oh yeah, like cryptid erotica. And I found this, and I was like, I found this book that was all about somebody having sex with jackalopes, which are like an American folklore, which is a hare with antlers. And I found this erotica that was all about people having sex with jackalopes. And then afterwards I was like, oh, they were children's authors. That might not have been the right thing to say. But it's out there. I didn't write it. It's out there.
They did ask the question though, didn't they?
They did ask the question.
Some people are weird, aren't they, out there? Yeah. Was it called jackalopes?
Yeah.
What's your fascination with cryptids?
I just feel like at some point it wouldn't massively surprise me if they found the Loch Ness Monster. Do you know what I mean? And I'd be really happy if they did. I think when I was a kid, cryptids didn't scare me the way that ghost stories did. And I felt like, well, there's so many places in the world that are unexplored. Maybe there is Bigfoot out there. Maybe there is Mothman. And, there's some of them that I'm less inclined to believe. Actually, admittedly, Bigfoot being one of them. I want Bigfoot to be real, but I really don't think that he is. But I think there's a tangibility to cryptids that I like, except when you get into the kind of the more mad end of cryptids, where it's like the Van Meter visitor, where it has, wings and shoots lasers out of its forehead and stuff. Then it gets a bit like, well, I don't know if I can hold on to this one. But other ones like Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster and stuff, there's a tangibility that I like.
To be honest, I think at this stage, I wouldn't be surprised if a cryptid or an alien popped out of Joe Biden or any politician at this point.
Yeah,
like surprise, we're here.
Like that thing in Men in Black.
Yeah,
where
moving the controls. This little tiny
the little man living
creature.
inside his head.
Your ghost story. Your ghost story.
So Emma, what was the very first thing that happened in your life that made you believe there could be maybe some form of afterlife, or there could be something supernatural about the world? Or
I'm really sorry if anybody has ever listened to me talk on anything before, because I tell this story all the time and I guarantee you people are sick of hearing it. But I was a spooky gal when I was a kid. Like, I was fascinated by all those kind of books about like cryptids and ghosts and whatever. But I wasn't necessarily a big believer in anything. And I still am kind of not, which is admittedly. But when I was like 17, I started working in what used to be this huge lunatic asylum in Laois, which is where I'm from in Ireland, and it was called Maryborough Lunatic Asylum, and it wasn't called that when I worked there. They also no longer refer to it as an asylum, but I use that word to give context for how long it was there. Like, it was built in the 1800s, you know, it housed a lot of patients over the years, and probably wasn't a very nice place for a very long time, because people didn't really know how to manage mental illness for a really long time. And when I worked there, it was the part that it was still a functioning psychiatric hospital, but there was also a residential home for adults with intellectual disabilities, which was where I worked. And before I started working there, and this isn't actually that long ago, so I'm 33 now, and I was 17 when I started working there. But not long before I started working there, they had like an exorcism mass in the building, and they got a priest in who was kind of sympathetic towards that kind of thing, and they had gotten this priest to say this exorcism mass. And the reason was that at nighttime people kept hearing things, and some people were seeing things. So for example, the hospital was split into 3 floors, and at nighttime the top floor was always empty. There was nobody on the top floor, and because of the nature of some of the clients that were housed there, all of the doors had to be locked behind you. It was just one of those facilities. And so the top floor was always empty, but night staff would report hearing people running up and down on the top floor, or they would set the table for breakfast the next morning and come up the next morning and everything would be all over the floor, or furniture would be heard being like dragged around upstairs. Kind of usual spooky shit. And I remember like having this conversation one day with 2 male nurses who had worked there. One of them had worked there for a really long time, and one of them had been there for kind of as long as I had. And they were talking about one night they were working the night shift, and they heard all of this running around upstairs, and they were thinking, right, we have to go check. Like, if somebody's broken in, it could be a danger to the clients, could be a danger to us. We're gonna brave it. We're gonna check. So they went off upstairs feeling very brave, and obviously there was nobody on the top floor. And on the top floor there was like a breaker panel that had all of the light switches, and one of the nurses was standing next to the breaker panel, and he said he watched as each switch flicked off and the lights went off closer and closer to them. And by that point, both of them just looked at each other and went, yeah, no, we're not doing this. We're not going to check anymore tonight. But anyway, so they got the priest in to do this exorcism mass, and it seemed to have helped things. Now, I used to work on that top floor on my own all of the time, and it never really bothered me. I'd be there like really like first thing in the morning when it was still dark, and it was fine. And I'd probably be there in the evenings when it was dark, and it was fine. It never really bothered me. But it was a very strange building because it was huge and it was sprawling, and there were parts of it that just gave me the heebie-jeebies. Like, I just can't even describe to you how freaky it was. Like, one day the fire alarm went off, and on the panel it would tell you where the alarm had been tripped or where the fire was, and the fire alarm went off and it was like in the basement. And I was like, where's the basement? I didn't even know there was one. I mean, it makes sense that there is one. So I ended up going into this basement with other members of staff, and it was this huge cavernous basement, and there were all these like bolts on the walls, and I was like, what happened down here? Why are there all these like big bolts on the walls? Did they? And the nurse that was with me was like, I think it's best that we don't dwell on this, and there's no fire, we just leave. And I was like, yes, let's do that. Anyway, God, I'm making this
building the
really
suspense.
Long.
I like it.
I know, I'm just dragging it out. So when I worked there, I worked there for 5 years, and like, other than kind of feeling generally spooked in various parts of the buildings, like nothing really happened to me, and it was fine. Like, there were various strange things that happened to other people. There were rooms that patients would like just continuously refuse to be in, different patients, and there were some patients that would say that people came into the room at nighttime, all this really strange stuff. And there was one day, and I always remember it was a bank holiday Monday, and it was after snowing really heavily. and I was on my morning break, and it was like 10 o'clock in the morning, and I had snuck out for a cigarette with one of the other girls. So we were like standing in an alleyway trying to smoke this cigarette without getting caught. And in front of me was a building that's now called the Child and Family Building. Actually, I don't know if it is anymore, but at that time it was called the Child and Family Building. It was basically like now used for admin. There was no patients in that building, and it was used for admin and for people to come and like register their children, all that kind of stuff. And I looked up, and on the third floor of the building, there was a woman staring back at me. And I know she was young, and she was deathly pale, and she had like a white dress on her, and she had long dark hair. And the thing that always really freaks me out about this, because I don't think I really registered in my brain what was happening at the time, was that she had just black hollows instead of eyes.
Fuck that.
And I remember that feeling of like that sick swooping feeling, and I didn't really register. I wasn't like, oh my god, I've seen a ghost, like whatever. I just stayed smoking my cigarette and was like, what the fuck? And she like drifted away from the window. Oh, and I can still see her in my brain, and every time I think about it, like it makes my eyes well up with tears. Like it just was so bizarre. And then about 30 seconds later, the girl that was smoking a cigarette with me, she just took off and she ran towards the door, and she was trying to get her keys out of her pocket to unlock the door to get in. And I was going, what is it? What's wrong? And she turned to me and she went, did you not just see that girl? Did you see that girl in the window? And I was like, yes, actually, I did see that girl. So trying to be kind of rational and level-headed, I said, right, well, here's the thing. If there is a girl in that building, like there can't be, because that's really dangerous, and we need to tell somebody that there's somebody either locked in the building or somebody's broken into the building, whichever one it is. So I went and I got security, and I said, hey, we're after seeing somebody in Child and Family. And the security guard was like, no, that's not possible. And I was like, no, genuinely, I literally just saw a woman in the window. She was looking at me, I was looking at her. She was real. I saw this woman. So can you please go and check it out? And we went to the building to get in, and all the building doors, external doors, were code locked. So you couldn't, for the admin buildings, because they had been kind of done up nicer, they were code locked, and you had to put in a code to get through the door. And if nobody was in the building, the alarms would be going off. So he went and checked, all the code locks were on, there was nobody in the building, and all the alarms were set, and none of the alarms had tripped. And he was like, oh, you must have been like imagining things, or you must have seen something and thought it was a woman. I was like, no, it was definitely a woman. Like I definitely saw her. Anyway, really freaked me out. I was only working a 4-hour shift, so I went home at like 12, and I was like, that is the weirdest thing that's happened. What the heck? Anyway, about a year later, I was working on the ward again, and the nurses were all having this conversation about like weird things that had happened in their lives. As happens, people get onto ghost stories and whatever. And somebody turned around to me and went, oh, Emma, tell that story about the time you saw the woman in Child and Family. So I told my story, and one of the nurses looked at me and rolled up his sleeve, and his whole arm was out in goosebumps, and his hair was all standing on end. And I was like, God, it wasn't that scary. Like, calm yourself. And he turned around to me and he went, I see her all the time. And I was like, sorry. And he used to work the night shift. And when you're working the night shift, you were sort of in this glass office in the dormitory, like a nurse's station, and all the patients would be asleep in the dormitory, and he worked on the female ward. And he said that numerous times he had been on the night shift and seen like the flash of a woman in a white dress run past the nurse's station. And the first, couple of times he went and checked, and obviously it was nobody, and all the patients were accounted for. And he'd be like, I definitely just saw a woman. And then he said eventually he just stopped checking, because he was like, this isn't real. Like, this isn't a real woman, and I don't know what to do about it. And I think it profoundly impacted my attitude, at least, towards the paranormal.
Now that is a ghost story. Yeah.
Sorry, I realised I just went on. I just went on a monologue there.
It was nice. I like the roller coaster ride of emotions, like where it took us.
That's a story.
As you can see, you're a great storyteller. Fantastic story.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, the detail about the eyes. I mean, if I saw someone and they just had black holes where their eyes should be, I don't know.
Yeah, what's going on
instant
with your eyes?
pit in the stomach feeling of like, that's evil. That's not right. Something's not
Yeah.
right there. Where's your eyes?
It just had to be a fucking lunatic asylum as well, didn't it? If you could imagine the creepiest place you'd ever want to go at nighttime, it'd be a lunatic asylum, I reckon.
I don't think I told you a story that happened to me. It must have been about 4 weeks ago now. While you was telling that story, it reminded me. So in my day-to-day job, I sort of I'm an electrician, but it's not the standard sort of electrician. We deal with like the management of the building, heating wise. And anyway, so my was working in a council office. I won't say where, but I was working in a council office in a really old building. And my boss tells me to go find the internal sensor. So I was like, okay, yep. So I'm going around to try and find this internal sensor to replace it. And this is around about 5 o'clock. So there's only the cleaners like in the buildings, and there's like everything's locked. You need like PIN codes to get in. And so I found a cleaner, and she was really jumpy. Like as I said, I didn't make a jump or anything. Just hello. She just jumped out of her skin. I was told her what I needed to do, and I need to find a sensor. And I noticed there was a basement, and I said, "Can I look in the basement? Just because I don't know what's in there, and it's got like this locked door." She goes, "Yeah, okay." Took me to the basement. She put the key code in, and she goes, "Right," and she looked me dead in the face, really serious. And she opened the door. She got a fire extinguisher put in front of it, and it was a blast door. And she put it down. She goes, "When I come down here, you should come with my colleague, and we always come down here in twos. We clean this place as quick as we can and can get out." I was like, "What?" She goes, "And we must not let this door close behind us because, I don't want to be trapped down here." And I was thinking, what? And it was a proper like sort of blast door. And we're sort of walking through the like complex, and there's all these different side rooms off to left and right with like bunk beds set up. In the main area bit was set up like a living room, but then there was just like a load of like maps and all that strewn across the floor. And she said this during the era of the Cold War, this bunker was built to protect the local councillor and the doctor and a few important people, just in case there was a nuclear attack or something. But honestly, I probably because we were underground, it felt so unnatural. And I don't know if it was like her making me feel a bit on edge, but she was always like looking around really quickly, and she was like showing me through some of the rooms. And then she's like, "I don't know what's in that door. You can open it if you want, but I'm not sure." And I'm just standing. And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't think this thing that I'm looking for is going to be down here." I was like, we can go out now if you want." She's like, "Okay." And I tried getting it out of her, and I was like, "There's something really weird happened down here." And she goes, "We don't like it. We don't like it in here." She's like, "We're getting out now." And it was just a really weird sort of like vibe that she was like giving me. I was like, clearly something has happened in this building with these two cleaners. But yeah, I mean, I had no chance of me ever going back there to try and get a story out of them. But something happened. It was weird.
You should have got it out of her and got her on the podcast. Something about these underground places. So going back to your story, Emma, it's really fascinating to hear about the things on the walls. Did you ever look into that, or did you ever find out about what that was? Or
I'm right. I'm trying to think of a way to say this diplomatically. Patients historically in that building, like, and this is a fact, this isn't like speculation, weren't treated in a way that would be considered okay today. So I while I didn't like go and try and look into it, I didn't feel like I needed to. Do you know that? You know what I'm trying to say? It wasn't good.
they said enough without saying
Yeah.
nothing at all, as Ronan Keating once said.
A scholar and a philosopher, Ronan Keating is.
Talking about the things down in the basement on the walls, I don't think we need to find out what happened down there, because yeah, like you said, a lot of stuff happened back in the day, which is kind of sad and not nice to think about what happened to people in these places.
Yeah, most definitely. And I just, my mum used to work with a woman, so my mum was a nurse and worked in the same worked in that building, and she used to work with a woman who would say that of all places, that was a place where there was just sadness in the walls and you could feel it all of the time. And it always stuck with me that she said that, because it was it was so true. It was a really, really sad place for lots of different reasons, and pretty terrifying when you're 17 years old and you're wandering around this giant creepy asylum in the dark.
That's a very poetic way to say it. Sadness in the walls.
I know.
I like that.
I wish I'd come up with it, but I didn't.
Yeah. Makes me want to put it in a song.
This might be a difficult question for you, but in a nutshell, briefly tell us the spookiest story you've ever read out on your show. And if you can remember what episode it was, so our listeners can tune in to listen more.
So I've thought about this, and I'm not going to go for the spookiest story that I've told on the podcast, because I'm just difficult and I like to do things differently. My favorite, and it is kind of my all-time favorite story that I've ever told, is the story of Gef the Mongoose. Do you guys know that story?
No, I'm intrigued though.
I've not heard that story.
So Gef the Mongoose is, I'm trying to find what episode number it is, and I can't. I gave it some sort of clever name for the episode at the time, and now I can't remember. But Gef the Mongoose is a story that is all about a talking mongoose, and it's honestly one of the best stories ever. And it's just been made into a film with Simon Pegg, and I just can't wait to see it. It's going to be amazing. But it was
Episode 79.
Episode 79. You got it. Did I call it the Dolby Spook or Gef the Mongoose? I don't remember which one I did.
Gef the Talking Mongoose.
I changed the name. I'm very clever.
But it's Gef with a G.
Gef.
And one F.
Yeah, you got it. Gef apparently came to the Isle of Man from India on a boat, and he described himself. So Gef was obviously a talking mongoose, as the title would suggest, and he lived in the walls of this family's house, and he described himself as like a wonder of the world, and he was like, I am terrible, I am wonderful, I have all these special powers. And literally all of these big psychic investigators like Harry Price came and to investigate this, and Nandor Fodor came to investigate, and they were like, this is real, this is really happening. And everyone for a time believed that there really was a talking mongoose living in the walls of this family's house. It's incredible. It's such a great story.
Oh, gonna have to listen to that episode. So you say Simon Pegg is making a film on this story?
Yeah, so Simon Pegg is playing one of the paranormal investigators who goes to the Isle of Man to investigate the story. And what everyone sort of brushed over at the time is that all of it focused on, there was like a teenage girl living in the house called Voiri, and the Gef the Mongoose was obsessed with her and followed her around, etc., etc. But then afterwards, people who were her contemporaries were like, yeah, she was really good at ventriloquism. Like, she used to do it all the time in school. But all of the investigators were like, just ignored that. They just completely brushed over that, and they were like, did you know what this is? Definitely a talking mongoose. That's what this is. And there's photographic evidence of him, and the photographic evidence is incredible. It's just such a great story, and I loved it. I love every bit of it, and I would tell that story to everybody for the rest of my life. I just love it.
So there it is, episode 79 of Real Life Ghost Stories, Gef the Mongoose. I can't wait to listen to that one.
I mean, it's definitely not scary, so let's just put that out there. So don't get disappointed when you listen to it and you're like, hang on, I was expecting something horrific. I don't know how horrific a talking mongoose could conceivably be, to be honest.
That's gonna. I'm really excited to see the film adaptation of Gef the Mongoose. I really love Simon Pegg films. I think there's maybe one or two that I've thought haven't really hit the mark, but the rest have just been amazing. So, and I think in this kind of paranormal field, and obviously it's going to be a comedy, so I think it's going to be good.
I've got a question for you guys. Sorry, I keep asking you questions. Do you guys have a story? Because I've only just started listening to your podcast, so I haven't listened to them all. Do you guys have a story that has like captured you or really freaked you out, or did you have a story that that hasn't been on the podcast that has really freaked you out?
Yeah, we've both got stories. So if you listen to our first ever episode, it's called Host Stories. Do you see what we did there? Yeah, that's got pretty much both of our entire lifelong, collection of ghost stories or experiences that have happened to us. But for me, one of the weirdest one I think's happened to me. I've seen things when I was younger, not so much in recent years, but this is something that was kind of audible that happened to me, and I say it in detail in the first episode of our podcast, but just to kind of sum it up. So I was sitting in my room one day. I was living at my mum's. This was probably about 6 years ago, or maybe a little bit more. And her ex-husband was there at the time. So they were together, at the time. And me and him didn't really get on, see eye to eye. And one day I spent a lot of time upstairs alone in my bedroom. And one day I was just sitting there in my room, working on my laptop, and clear as a day, I heard 3 knocks on my door and I heard his voice, "Jamie, come downstairs now." And straight away, I'm an adult, and it was just really out of place for him to talk to me like that. And I was just like, what the fuck? And I said, "Why?" Like really bluntly, because I was like, that was rude for you to talk to me like that. So I was like, what's the problem? Then there was just no answer. And it's a really small 3-bedroom house, and the doors are all next to each other, and there's just a tiny landing. And you'd know if my door was shut, but you'd know if someone was there. And I heard nothing, heard no noise. And I said, "Yeah, what is it? What do you want?" Again, just complete silence, no answer. I didn't think much of it. I was like, "Oh, that's really weird." So I just went downstairs, and my mum was in the same room, and I just said, "What does your partner want? What's his problem?" And she was like, "Oh, he's outside." I said, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Oh, well, fair enough. You must not have heard him come up the stairs, but I'll go outside." Went outside and knocked on his shed, and I said, "Yeah, what is it you want?" And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You literally knocked on my door, said, 'Jamie, come downstairs now,' in like an angry tone. And now I'm here and you're telling me, you're like, what's going on?" I was just so confused. And he was like, honestly, it was like, I wasn't inside. I've been here the whole time. And I was just, to this day, I'm just like, but so many things have happened in that house. That's just one of many. My mum still lives there actually, and she claims it's not haunted, but me and my siblings definitely know something's up.
What is it about mams, right? So my mom used to work in this house that was definitely haunted, and she'd be like, no, it's fine, it's fine. I just went into the sitting room the other day and all the pictures were upside down, but like, it's grand.
It was
I
the
just put them back
wind.
and I'm like, can you just admit that it's haunted and let's get on with it? Like,
I think what it is, I think I've kind of got this out of my mum before, I think it's a protection thing. They don't want, as a mother, they don't want us to be scared, or they kind of want to protect us from, if something spooky is happening. I think that's what it is. But yeah, my mum's been like that my whole life. And we before even that, we lived in a really haunted house. Well, again, me and 2 of my sisters claim. And but no, it wasn't haunted at all. And she even saw a ghost in that house, but it wasn't haunted. I'll tell your story now.
My story. Okay. I've got quite a few. I mean, one of the major ones, again, like most of the people on our podcast, they hear me talk about this one over and over again, but it was the most terrifying thing I ever sort of like experience I had. But it's weird because I wasn't terrified at the time. I was terrified exactly straight away after. And it's what happened with one of my friends as well. And so I've got him as a future guest coming up on the show. But how it happened was we were just messing around. We were messing around in a graveyard. But before that, we went to the pub and was having a few drinks. And then we were talking about
Can you just clarify what messing around in a graveyard is? 'Cause for some people, that might mean something strange.
Basically, walking through a graveyard saying, Is there anyone there? Is there any spirits there?" And I kid you not, if someone was just walking their dog or something and shouted, "It's Dave," I would have probably cacked it right there and then and gone, right, believe. But yeah, go back to the start. Me and my friend Jack was at the pub having a catch up and drink, and we're talking all about all manner of things. And we got onto the subject of I can't remember what it was called on TV, but it was something like I don't think it's called Most Haunted, but it was those TV shows where those people like the presenters would go out to a location. I think it was Derek Horror was a medium or something on it.
Oh yeah, it was
it
Most Haunted, yeah.
UK's? Yes, and we was just having a laugh and saying how it was so fake and this, that, and whatnot, and really sort of like taking the piss. And one of us was like, "Oh, let's go to the graveyard," because it was literally a minute walk. So we go to the graveyard, do a bit of ghost hunting, not really know what we're doing, going to this graveyard and just sort of like walking around because it's completely pitch black. Any ghosts there? Or I feel like we're just laughing. And then across the road is a really old jailhouse, which was built in like Victorian times to lock up like local drunks. So we walked over to that, and again, this must have been about 8 o'clock at night. There's no one around. It was in autumn, so it was like quite dark, and we were standing at the front of this building. There's no windows. It's just a door with iron bars across the top. So if you shone a light in there, you could only see into one room, and you could see the opening of the second room, but you couldn't see much in there. So Jack goes, "Oh, I've got a really good idea." He's like, "If I stick the voice recorder on my phone, you can talk to the spirits." So we were just like laughing, like proper laughing about it. And then once we regained our sort of like composure, he put his phone up against the into the bars, put it on record, and I said, if there's any ghosts or any spirits there, knock twice for yes and once for no." And we just stood there for a couple of seconds, and then he stopped the recording, and we were just laughing because how stupid it sounded. And while still standing next to the jailhouse, we had a few street lights which were like giving this eerie orange glow, and it was a bit misty as well. So he played back this recording, and I have actually got the recording, so I could send it to you if you want to listen to it. But as soon as he plays it back, there's all this banging, like knock, 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 knock. And at the beginning of the recording, I can hear a voice say, "Go away." And at the end of it, there's this, as if someone's come right up to his phone and gone, "Ah," and he just goes, "What the fuck?" And then like he screamed and took off running, and then that scared the shit out of me. So I'm like running after him, and he's ran to the nearest lamppost because there's a little bit of light there. So I've caught up with him, and he's like, "What the fuck is that? What the fuck is that? What the fuck is that?" And then we ended up going to my house, and I got the recording off of his phone and put it on the computer, and like sort of like put the volume up, and that's when you could clearly hear sort of like something saying "go away." But yeah, that was absolutely freaky because this old building it's locked to the public. No one can get in or out of it unless you got the keys, like a councillor or the council would have the keys. So it couldn't have been someone trying to play a prank on us because there was no one in there. There was no one around. But what the weirdest thing was, we didn't hear anything standing there in front of the door. It was only when he played back his phone that we heard it. It absolutely terrified us. That was one of the most sort of like surreal things, like that I had a bit of evidence to say like, no, that actually happened because we both experienced it and we have a bit of evidence. Someone could say, "Oh, we faked it," but we both know that at the time we was only like 19. None of us had the skills or the know-how to sort of like fake it to make a recording and stuff. But yeah, that was quite terrifying for me and my mate Jack.
That gave me the heebie-jeebies. EVPs are always so scary, and sometimes you hear somebody does an EVP on a ghost hunting show or whatever, and you're like, that is nothing. That's nothing. It doesn't say anything. And then every so often there's one that makes you go, "Oh shit, oh no, that did sound like something."
I've got one as well from the same house, EVP, as just a voice. I was winding my sister up one day, and I was just filming her trying to get her phone back because I was just being an annoying big brother, and I snatched her phone out of her hand while she was texting. I just filmed her trying to get it back, just being really annoying, and halfway through, basically, I just stopped it, gave it back to her. I was like, "Oh, let's just watch it." After about 30 seconds, and we watched it, and just out of nowhere, in the middle of this recording, there's just a voice that sounds like an old lady that goes, "What are you doing?" And like, yeah, like I haven't actually put this on the podcast yet, but maybe in one of the future episodes, I've still got the video, so I'll extract the audio and put it on.
It's so weird. Yeah, I remember you showing me that. And at first, I didn't quite. It does sound like there's someone else in the room with you, and it was just like, that's so creepy.
That is so weird.
And then just to round it off, so you asked about our stories. We won't tell the whole story, but just me and Nigel actually had an experience together. So we were deep cave diving somewhere in Gloucestershire. I think it was. Was it Gloucestershire? And
yes,
yeah, we were deep in these caves. We told the whole story again, episode 1, so we won't go into it. But as basically we're in a small tour, and there's about maybe max 6-8 people on this tour, and 4 of us were friends and the tour guide and a couple of other people. And we basically go into this cave, and he locks the cave behind us, so padlocks it. There's a metal gate, padlocks it. I think so.
So we can't escape.
Yeah, it's so people can't come in and fuck with us, while we're in this cave, or local people can't come and take drugs down there or whatever, whatever. And we were down there, and we walked miles into this cave, and Nigel was bum stuck, and and then on the walk back, so we're coming the same route, and just in the middle of the path, there was a rock formation, like a perfect rock formation, which wasn't there on the walk forward. And we're all in a small, tidy group, locked in this cave where no one can get in or out. And
walking single file, basically.
And just before that happened, we were having a conversation with the tour guide, and we said, has there been any ghost stories or anything down here? And he was telling us essentially quite a famous story.
Clearwell Caves, but I don't...
Clearwell Caves. So if you Google the old man in Clearwell Caves, it's a really well-documented story of like a TV crew that went down there, basically saw an old man. But yeah, that's a really cool story. We didn't see no old man, but together we saw this just weird, perfect rock formation that was about waist height that wasn't there when we walked in, just after we'd asked the guy about ghost stories.
And it was a load of stones that were stacked from like large getting smaller and smaller to
like balance, rock balancing. That's what it is.
Yeah, rock balancing. Yeah, and there was no time for anyone in the group to have set that up, so it wasn't there on the way in, but on the way out, it was there, and it was just so sort of like weird.
We got this vibe that even the tour guide was a bit like, he didn't really want to talk about it. He was just a bit like, kind of like, we were like, what's that about? And he's like, I don't know. Kind of went a bit quiet. And we're like,
yeah, this way.
Yeah, this way, let's go. Like, we're near the exit. And he's just went a bit quiet.
Sure,
going to the gift shop.
Like, I'm sure he was thinking, listen, I've seen the Blair Witch too, okay? And I have to work here. So we're not getting into this.
But yeah, that rounds up some of our stories. So Emma, what a pleasure this has been. It's been really, really amazing talking to you. We don't want to take up too much of your time. We know you're super busy working on your awesome podcast. So can you tell our listeners where they can find your show?
So you can find my show. It's called Real Life Ghost Stories, and you can find it everywhere that you get podcasts, and also on YouTube. Yeah, that's basically it. And I'm going to be really annoying, and I'm going to hijack the last bit of it as well, because I know that you asked for a genuinely spooky episode of the podcast, so I'm going to give you one, because I've given you Gef the Mongoose, which is genuinely the best story ever, and nothing can ever top it in my eyes, but that's just me. But episode 195 of the podcast is called The Boy They Tried to Hide. And I honestly have never come across a story like it. So to give you a very brief, give your listeners a very brief synopsis of the story. It's a true story that is in the west of Ireland, and it was written by a social worker who was working in a school with kids, and this little kid kept running away, and his ma was like, he keeps running away, I don't know why it's happening. And the social worker was like, shit, well, children run away if something's really bad at home, or they're running away to somebody. So they were like, where's he going? This little kid is running away out into the woods all the time, and they can't figure out why he's doing it. And then eventually he's like, well, no, I've just made a new friend out there, that's all it is. And they establish that there is no friend, and they think, right, well, he is an imaginary friend, fine. And then he goes missing again, and this time the police get called because it's the middle of the night, everyone's freaking out, they can't find him. And they talk to the police, and they're like, listen, he has this imaginary friend, this has been going on for ages. And then the police say, well, why are there 2 sets of footprints outside the window then if this friend is imaginary? And there's 2 sets of footprints, and honestly, the story is wild, and it involves like a secret that's kind of in the whole town that everyone knows about, and something that happened in the woods, and it blew my mind. And eventually I got the author to come on the podcast because I was so like, I need to this cannot be real, and I need to speak to you about it. And I spoke to him on the podcast, and honestly, I didn't get a sense that he had made any of the story up. He was like, I can't tell you what happened, but like, I don't know what it was, but this is what happened. So if you're into like freaky imaginary friend shit and like weird stuff that happens in backwoods and small towns, and what gets left behind, then that story is a good place to start.
That sounds crazy. And yeah, I can't wait to get into this story. So is episode 195, has it got the guy on it? The guy
No, so the episode is 195, the boy they tried to hide,
Mhm.
and then it's the episode with him on it is a couple of episodes later, and it's called Bonus Episode with Shane Dunphy. And he is, well, he's not anymore, but he's an ex-social worker, and now he's like an expert. He consults with like the police and the government all about like child protection cases and stuff. And this guy is out here being like, this crazy paranormal story happened, and I just need to put it out there. And it's I don't know, it freaked me out, and I just couldn't believe that something like that could happen, but apparently it did.
That's so scary. Definitely got a lot to listen to tonight before I go to bed.
Gef the Mongoose is good bedtime listening. The boy they tried to hide, maybe not.
The boy they tried to hide is when you've got like loads of people around you, and you're not going to be alone that night.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can like watch some cartoons afterwards or something.
Your ghost stories. Your ghost stories.
Emma, what an honour and what a privilege it's been to have you on our show. We really look up to you as brand new podcasters, so it really is a great privilege to have you join us on this show. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for being on.
Oh, and thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've loved it. You guys are great. Thank you.